Hi YouTube. So here's my Cat 950 and here's the lifting actuators that go inside here. Now it turns out that these actuators are actually pretty bad quality. They break pretty often and people are having quite a few problems with them not being strong enough and stuff like that. So what I'm working on right now, I'm working on a conversion to get rid of these actuators and putting in this big motor instead. Now this is a double shaft or dual axle motor. I bought this on AliExpress and this is the specs of it. You can go with a 10 RPM if you want. This one is a little fast in my opinion, but it works. As you can see, I've already installed these parts on my loader, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to build those parts and then we're going to jump over to this, because you mount these the same way as you mount the original parts. Now during this upgrade there's a few steps that are super important, but we'll get back to them later. Let's just begin assembling these parts. Now, before we install the motor, we need to put these adapter plates in here, or spacers if you want, because these will keep the motor centered on this front chassis. I'm going to glue this piece onto the chassis here. Like so. And then we install the motor. There we go. Now you insert a couple of screws on this side. Now these are M4 by 10 millimeter. I recommend that you use M4 by 12 millimeter, but I don't have that laying around, so that's the motor in place. Now you need the other spacer onto the motor. So what I do, I just glue this onto the motor. There we go. So now you might want to fill in weights and stuff where there's room for that. And also on the old model, the actuator for the bucket sits on top here and the wire goes through here. On this one it doesn't go through, so you have to run the wire for the bucket actuator over and down. Now once you fill this area with weights, you just simply attach this chassis piece right here, and that's most of the upgrade parts put together. Now we're going to jump over to this step right here. I've already assembled these onto the loader, but as I said earlier, it's very simple to do. You just follow the original instructions on how to mount these up. Now this is the front axle. It mounts in the same way, and also these side chassis pieces, they mount the same way too. As you can see, I'm reusing these from my old design. So, over to the most important step, which is the lifting mechanism. Now, in order to understand my solution to the lifting, you have to look at these parts. Now keep in mind, first of all, that these motor shafts, they have the flat part on the same, in the same place on both sides. You see? Now that's good, that's great. The only problem is that these don't always have the holes lined up for the set screws. Which then creates problems when you try to make parts with pre-drilled holes in them, because then they will be mounted differently onto these. I don't know if you can see it, but these holes are definitely very off center. This one in particular is more to the left. And this is the same problem with all of these that I have. None of them are the same. So what I'm gonna have to do now is just mount these onto the motor, and then I put these on top of them like so, and then I just melt out the holes manually. Now I tried to 3D print these. They are just made of plastic and they have no steel reinforcements. So I tried these at first, but as you can see, the motor just has too much power. It eats through the plastic. This is after 15 minutes of testing, and this is printed solid. So I'm going to show you how much wear it had in 15 minutes. Yeah, look at this. So this is not going to work. We have to use the couplers. Now before I begin putting on these, I'm going to spin the motor so that the flat axle faces this way. It's much easier to put these on. So I'm going to hook some power onto the loader and turn it around. Now, if you don't have the motors attached to the ESC and you can't operate the motor with your transmitter, don't worry, you can just put a battery onto the wires to the motor and it will spin. So like I always do, I'm going to mark out on the axle and then make a groove so that the set screw, these screws right here, will dig into the axle shaft. That will seal this motor coupling a lot better. There you can see I made a mark with my pencil. So I'm going to take the Dremel and make a groove there. Now I highly recommend that you use Loctite or some type of gel glue. So that's one motor coupling in place. Now I'll do the other one off camera. So before we mount these onto the couplings, we have to secure the arms, because in order for this to be precise, and you need these to be in the same place on both sides, we are going to secure the arms by just putting the screws down here, and then we attach this onto the link for the arm, and that way we know that they both stay in the same place. Now while we're at it, new arms are in the files, but if you have already printed and assemble the old arms, you can just drill a little hole right here and put these on. Now it's also important to notice which way these parts are going to be mounted. You see this little groove right on the top here? This should face upward. Now this little lip right here is supposed to hit an end switch, so this one has to be mounted on the inside. And you just put it on, slide it on over like this. Now this have the same diameter as the motor coupler, so you can easily see when it's in place. I'm going to take it off. Now I'm going to mount this onto the arm link right here. Now when you mount this onto the motor coupler, you gotta try to make note of where the holes are, so I'm going to use my pencil. So I'm going to take my soldering iron and I'm going to create the holes so that I can put in screws. Now when I just press the soldering iron down, it should self-center into the holes. Before we clean up the holes with a knife, we're going to let the plastic cool down a little. So the next step will be to take a 4mm drill and drill through this top piece right here. Don't drill all the way through, only this piece. Now the piece on the bottom needs to have a tighter hole so that the screws can set themselves in there. Remember, the holes on this is 4mm. Now you don't want to put a 3mm screw on a 4mm hole because that will create slop. So now I take a 3.5mm drill and drill through the bottom plate so that I can attach the screw. Before I drill the other holes, I will put in the screw there. So there we go. Now this hole, there's no point in putting a screw in there since there's nothing on the back side. So that's one side. Now I'm going to do the other one off camera. Remember, drill the upper holes 4mm, then the downer holes 3.5mm. Then you just put in, these are 4mm by 10mm screws. And the next step for you will be to put on the outer wall, which is very easy to do. Gotta remove this screw first. So just put it in place and put in the screws. Now you might have noticed that there's no end switches in here yet, so you're gonna have to put on a couple of end switches. So I'm going to show you how to put them on and make them work. Let me just flip this loader over without breaking it. There we go. So here you can see that I have already installed the end switches. So in order to make the end switches work, you need of course the end switches themselves, and you need a one-way diode, which is one of these. Now the part number for these diodes, I will put them in the text right here. So when you install these, you want the arm for the lifting to be already installed, so that you can check where to put the end switches. You just lift it up and down, so you can attach these where you want them to be. But for the wiring, it's very simple. You can see from the motor, we have the black wire here coming out of the motor, and it goes into the end switch. It doesn't matter which side it goes into, but then it goes through and goes into the ESC. So this is the black wire on the ESC, goes through the end switch and into the black wire on the motor. And it's the same for the red wire. This is the red wire coming out of the motor. It goes into the end switch and goes out of the end switch back to the red wire on the ESC. When you put the wires on the end switches, you use the most outward positions. The one in the middle, you don't use that. And then once you have put the wires onto the end switch, you put the one-way diode that you can see right here. You put it between these 2 points. You solder it onto the both points. Now what this does is, when you press this switch, you cut the power between the wires, right? So that means that you can't go up or down. So you have to put a one-way diode on here, which allows the power to run one way. So after you install the one-way diodes, you have to test them if they work the correct way. And if it works the opposite way that you want it to work, then you just flip it around the other way. So here we have hooked up power to the loader, and I'm going to show you the end switches, how they work. So when I press down, the end switch cuts the power. I can't put the arms down anymore, so now this is where the one-way diode comes in. It allows the power to go the other way. So when I press up, it lifts. And now this lift right here will hit the other end switch. Like so. So this is why you have to have the arms mounted before installing or positioning the end switches. So you move the arm to the desired place, you install the end switch, and then you do the other end switch. Now keep in mind that these end switches, they are called micro end switches. They are smaller than the normal standard size. So I'm going to put on the wheels, and I'm going to bring this outside for a few tests, and I'll see you outside. So here I'm outside, and this is how the lifting system works. Now this is at 100% speed at channel 2. So this is the speed that you get on a 12 RPM motor. I'm actually going to turn this down to 70. So let's see how this works. So this seems to be working pretty well, and not only is this system faster and stronger, but it's more stable too, because it lifts equally on both of these lifters. If you have actuators and you get more load on one side, that actuator will rotate or move slower than the other one, causing this bucket to be off center, and that won't happen on this system. For example, if you put this rock on one side of the bucket, the actuators will stall out on that side, and this system, they won't do that. Yeah, see? Let's check if this can lift. I hope that this video answered all your questions, and I hope this explanation was enough to help you upgrade or even build a new loader with this lifting system. Alright guys, that concludes the Cat 950 upgrade. There's really no need of using the actuators anymore. These motors, they are stronger, faster, and more stable, and they're even cheaper to buy. You need one motor and you need two actuators, so one motor costs the same as one actuator, so it's almost half the price. The only downside is that it doesn't look as real as an actuator, but hell, this is a hobby, who cares? All in all, it's all pros and really no cons at this point. I do recommend that you turn down the power when it's lifting, because I don't know how long these small links will hold out. I haven't tested that yet, but I turned mine down to 70% because I think it was a little too fast on the lifting. So anyway, that's it for this time. I'll see you next time. Bye bye.